محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we continue with the Tafseer of Surat Al-Qalam. And I never find using the word coincidental to be appropriate when we talk about anything in life. And I think this is the Tafseer of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we're going to be starting our recitation today within Surat Al-Qalam بِقَوْلِهِ أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ. This is how the verse is going to start. And then when you continue with it, and subhanAllah, as I was humming the verses to myself on the way here, because I like to kind of just see where my head is, what headspace I'm in when I'm thinking about these verses. SubhanAllah, I was reciting these verses and thinking about how you can take so much from the Quran if you just apply it to the situations that you go through in life. And when we read them, I'm going to be explaining them I explain the Quran in a very generic way. I don't take it and apply it to specific situations. Even even verses that have asbab nuzul, I still don't apply it to the specific situation, but rather try and draw the parallels for everyone to learn from and to benefit from. And I think that's the right way to understand the Quran, looking at it from a thematic perspective and understanding the points and the themes that the Quran is trying to explain. But then, when you go through a specific situation, or you're in a scenario, or something's happening, an event that's occurring is of high magnitude in your life, and you read the Quran, you find that the verses in the Quran also speak to these little things that you're going through. And that's, to me, where the ijaz of the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes from. Like, this is how I appreciate the majesty and the majestic aspect of the Quran itself, is that you read it and you just look at it generally, and there's so much in it. And then as you go through life and you're dealt different hands, and you read the same verse that you understood very clearly in a generic and beneficial manner, and now you see it through the lens of your specific experience, and then you find in these verses even more to learn from. And that's just how the Quran has always been. And it's why those who accepted it as the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their guidance, found it to be of that magnitude and of that level. And Surat Al-Qalam is talking to us about what we need to have in terms of ethics or principles or values. And we've covered the first three chapters or paragraphs, of Surat Al-Qalam, and the first one explained to us or gave us what the standard was going to be, and the standard was the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And then the second chapter or paragraph, gave us the actual behaviors or the values in the negative terms, meaning telling us what not to do, what values not to have, in order for us to see what we should have. And that's how the Quran does a lot of these teachings, by the way, by going after the negative to keep the positive much more flexible and open. Then the third paragraph was the story of Ahl al-Jannah, which we shared over the course of the last 2 weeks, and we went into the different details. And it's an ethically driven or value-based story that talks to us about how what you really inherit in life are values and principles and ethics. And that one of the biggest crimes that you can commit in life is to ruin a beautiful ethic, to ruin a beautiful value or a beautiful principle that exists, for you to ruin it. And that was the sin of these three young men, is that their father had begun something beautiful. If there was nothing beautiful to begin with, and they didn't initiate something of beauty, then that's one problem. But they inherited a behavior, an ethic, a principle, a value of beauty, and then they ruined it. And that's just one of the worst things that you can do. For you to be handed something amazing, something that is superior, and there's just a lot in it for you and for people around you, and it's hard to achieve, it's not easy to come at, and then you let it go, and you let something beautiful go. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees that to be something extremely, extremely sinful. It's very horrible. It's worse than anything else you can do in life, if you inherit a beautiful ethic and then you let it go. And that's what these young men did. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't want to say punished them, but He for sure gave them a heavy wake-up call. He for sure sent them a slap in the face to see if they will change their ways. So the fourth chapter, or paragraph, in Surah Al-Qalam starts with ayah number 35. And I'm going to read a little bit of it with you, and we'll try to make it to the end of this paragraph. Some scholars look at whatever left of this surah to be one paragraph. I tend to break it down to two. But I'll leave that judgment, inshallah, for you as we go along. So we start with ayah number 35. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أفنجعل المسلمين كالمجرمين ما لكم كيف تحكمون أم لكم كتاب فيه تدرسون إن لكم فيه لما تخيرون أم لكم أيمان علينا بالغة إلى يوم القيامة إن لكم لما تحكمون. So this paragraph, the paragraph basically is just the first verse that we read. And everything after it is commentary. And the Quran works in that way sometimes, where the basic, the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to explain something to you in, He puts at the beginning. And then everything after it is just commenting on it. Commenting in a way of either encouraging you, discouraging you, showing you the reward, talking about the punishment, explaining the consequences. And here he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَفَنَجْعَلُ, it's a question, it's a rhetorical question. Are we going to treat al-Muslimin, kal-mujrimin, are we going to act as if the Muslim is similar to a criminal? And this is an important piece. I can't move on from this without you taking some time and thinking about it. What is the opposite of a Muslim in your mind? See, this is something that allows you to really contemplate. The opposite of a Muslim in your mind is usually not this word. Usually the opposite is أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْكَافِرِينَ, right? This is what's going to come to mind, because that's the opposite of a Muslim in our minds. Not for the purpose of this surah. Not for the purpose of Surat Al-Qalam, it isn't. For the purpose of Surat Al-Qalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at the importance of values and principles. So what's the opposite of a Muslim is someone who does not follow those values and principles. A mujrim, we use the word to describe a criminal. And you always think of someone who's going to jail or someone who's breaking the law. And it is accurate. But what law? What law is this mujrim breaking in the surah? Is it the law of the land, or is it the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So when you say mujrimeen here, he's not talking about your day-to-day criminal, your standard thief or corrupt person who is trying to evade the taxation and get away from, running red lights. No, this is someone who's breaking the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's refusing the law of God. And the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you think about it, this is another problem. This is why this ayah is not clear to people. They read it and they don't understand it. Because we have all these little things that we don't seem to understand appropriately. The first one is we think of the word mujrim, and then we apply it to a common thief or a common criminal, because we're looking at the law of the land. And unfortunately in our lives, we have learned to kind of be impressed by some of the criminals. Right? Robin Hood is a big deal, right? We look at people. We can holify or sanctify criminals sometimes in our minds. No, first of all, he's not talking about someone who's breaking the law of a king or the law of a corrupt government. He's talking about a criminal, mujrim, as in someone who's breaking the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's number one. Number two is, what is the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this mujrim is breaking? Because the word mujrim is important. If you start thinking again about aspects of fiqh, like you start thinking about someone who is not praying appropriately, or someone who is doing... No. The law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before everything is justice, is righteousness, is incorruptibility, is honesty, is integrity, is honor. These are the law of God. This is what Sharia is about. When you say the word Sharia, immediately in the mind, a hand is being chopped. That's all you can think about. It's happened maybe 10 times in the history of Islam. Maybe 10 times it's happened. This is not the law of God. These are hudud. A concept of hudud and punishments is a very, very specific part of fiqh that is left for jurists to actually discuss with judiciary consultation when it's a very, very specific. The concept of Sharia or the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not that. The law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is embedded in the concepts of righteousness, of justice, of equality, of freedom of religion, and freedom of thought, and freedom of wealth. And what is Islam here to protect? Islam is to protect your life, so that you live freely. It's here to protect your ird, so that you have integrity and people aren't walking all over you and mistreating you and taking away your honor, your aql, your sobriety, your ability to think freely, your deen, the ability to believe whatever you want to believe, your man, for you to have what you have and no one can come and take it away from you. This is what Islam is. This is what the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about. It's about preserving these rights. Now think of all that, think of the word mujrimeen. That's what mujrimeen is. The opposite of that. Someone who does not have these values, does not respect the law of Allah, does not respect the law of justice and equality and righteousness and freedom. He doesn't respect that. So the opposite of a mujrim to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a Muslim. That's the opposite of, if you understand what the word mujrim means in the Quran, then yes, the opposite of a mujrim is a Muslim. And the opposite of a Muslim is a mujrim. Because what defines a Muslim? Again, if we're looking at it in the wrong lens, we're just looking for a word that's being uttered, just a phrase that's being said. No, in Surah Al-Qalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at the concept of Muslim a little bit larger than that. Not just the word that's being uttered. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at the Muslim as someone who carries a certain set of values. The values that he talked about earlier. فَلَا تُطِعِ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ وَيَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُ فَيُدْهِنُونَ وَلَا تُطِعْ كُلَّ حَلَّافٍ مَهِينٍ هَمَّازٍ مَشَّاءٍ بِنَمِيمٍ مَنَّاعٍ لِلْخَيْرِ مُعْتَدٍ أَثِيمٍ عُتُلٍ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ زَنِيمٍ. He talked about these ones. Don't be like that. So a Muslim is someone who does not carry that stuff. So the opposite of a Muslim is going to be a mujrim. Within the context of Surat Al-Qalam, it makes sense, but this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees it. He sees a Muslim being in contrast of a mujrim, of someone who has no respect for the law that he put here, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no respect to the set of values and principles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made sacred. He made them sacred, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isn't that what the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam told us? This is what he said before he left, before he passed away, when he gave that famous sermon. He stood on Jabal al-Rahmah in Arafah, and then he stood again on the day of Nahr in Mecca, and he gave the same khutbah, like 3 or 4, some Sahaba say maybe 6 times he gave the same khutbah, and he would shake off certain paragraphs and put in other ones, but this paragraph he always put in every single time. He would stand there and ask them, what day is it today? And they would all say, he would correct them and say, it's Yawmun Haram. They would say Arafah, they would say Yawmun Nahr, which is correct, but he wanted something else. It's a sacred day. And what month is this? They would say Dhul Hijjah. He said, nope, it's a sacred month, it's haram. Where are we? Where are we standing on? It's Mecca. No, this is a sacred land. أَلَا إِنَّ دِمَاءَكُمْ وَأَمْوَالَكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ حَرَامٌ كَحُرْمَةِ يَوْمِكُمْ هَذَا فِي شَهْرِكُمْ هَذَا فِي بَلَدِكُمْ هَذَا. Indeed, the sanctity of people's lives and wealth is sacred to you, as the level of sanctity, the level of holiness and sacredness that all of these, that the person beside you carries towards you. I sit beside someone, this person is sacred to me. I do not harm them physically, I don't harm them, harm their wealth. No harm from me. Why? Because they're more sacred to me than the sanctity of a Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ on the day of Arafah in the month of Dhul Hijjah standing in Mecca. This is what he taught us. That's what Islam starts. That's where Islam begins. That is the first building brick of our deen. Always go back to what Islam is built upon. This is the first building brick of our deen, of the sanctity of human life and the sanctity of people's well-being. That's why the opposite of a Muslim is a mujrim, someone who does not see that. Someone who does not see that. Someone who's willing to take people's lives in the hundreds or the thousands, spill as much blood as needed to make sure that they do well, or they get what they want. No interest in the well-being of other human beings. That's a mujrim. A Muslim cannot be that. This ayah is saying you can't be a Muslim and a mujrim at the same time. You have to choose a lane. Either you're Muslim or you're mujrim. Can't be both. Can't be both. It's hard to comprehend that. It really is. But that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to treat it Yawm al-Qiyamah. You come to him as a mujrim. You come to him as someone who did not value the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did not respect it, did not live by it, did not see the importance of righteousness, of justice, of equality, of people's rights. and you're coming and claiming Islam. By what? How could you? How could someone come and claim Islam that way? It's not for me to judge. I can't judge them myself. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will. How can they come to Him and claim that they believed and they accepted and that they gave the shahada and they lived by it when they are mujrimeen? No. And He's asking it rhetorically, subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a rhetorical question. There's a little bit of mockery happening here. What? You thought we're going to treat Muslimin like mujrimeen? أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ? No, they're not the same. After a story, this ayah, by the way, after a story where 3 young men decided to withhold some of their orchards goods, right? That's what they did. They decided they didn't want to give the poor people some of the fruit from their orchard. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala burnt it down to the ground, taught them a very harsh lesson, and then said what? It's as if He's saying, after He told the story, you're standing there with your eyes popped out. Why? Why would you do that? Why did you burn it down to the ground? It's like you're sitting there listening to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell the story, and you are absolutely shocked by what did they do? They just didn't want to give away their wealth. Why would you burn it down to the ground like that for them? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if He's saying, what? You thought I was going to treat the Muslim like a mujrim? You think they're equal? You think a Muslimin and mujrimeen are the same? Why are you shocked? Why does this bother you? Why is the fact that I burnt it down to the ground bothering you? I don't treat the Muslimin like the mujrimeen, or the mujrimeen like the Muslimin. They're not equal to me. And a mujrim is going to be punished. Even if it takes a little bit of time, he's going to be punished. They're always going to be punished. It's just a matter of time. Right? Sometimes the problem is that we don't have a lot of time as individuals. Right? We don't have a lot of time, so we're hasty. We're in a rush. We're in a rush because we don't have time. We don't have enough of it. So we're in a rush. We want things to be done quickly. They get done. They just don't get done on your schedule. They just don't happen based on when you want it. You wanted it within a couple of days or weeks or months. It wasn't destined to happen like that. It does, which is why we have these stories in the Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala breaks that law, breaks the norm, and something happens really quickly, He tells a story of it. Because usually what would happen to these 3 young individuals is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're mujrimeen. How are they mujrimeen? They are breaking His law. The law of equality, the law of generosity, of taking care of the needy. That's His law subhanahu wa ta'ala. They broke the law. They're mujrimeen. They are worthy of punishment. How does this usually play out? Take the wealth. Take the wealth. Take it. Eat and drink. And watch how I will ruin your families and ruin your life. And take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so far away that you will have nothing to do with me at all, and then you'll find yourself in Jahannam yawm al-qiyamah. Wal-'iyadu billah. Wal-'iyadu billah. That's how this would usually play out. But for these 3 lucky individuals, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala burnt their orchard to the ground, waking them up that they have to make a different decision. They have to make a different decision. They have to do something differently. And they did. That's why at the end of it, they performed the full tawbah. Ya waylana inna kunna taghin asa rabbuna yubdilana khayran minha. And then they said it. Inna ila rabbina raghibun. Now what we want inside is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has waiting for us yawm al-qiyamah. He told you كذلك العذاب. That's how adhab is. That's how I punish. وَلَعَذَابُ الْآخِرَةِ أَكْبَرُ. But the punishment yawm al-qiyamah is worse. I punish them in dunya. I'm sure that those young men at the moment when they saw their orchard burnt to the ground, they thought that was the worst thing that ever happened to them. It wasn't. It was the best thing that ever happened to them. The worst thing would have been, let your mujrim go. Ruh. Get lost in your crookedness, in your corruption. Get lost in your wealth. And I will drive you farther and farther away from me, you and your children, to the point where yawm al-qiyamah you'll come and you'll have nothing waiting for you. Or I can do this. And then they wake up, and then they turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then إِنَّ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ جَنَّاتِ النَّعِيمِ. And they will get Jannat al-Na'im. What do you want? It's hard to say it, right? But what would you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do for you? If you were in their position. Yeah, it's hard. I don't blame you. You don't have to answer because it's impossible to say it. But yeah, I want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make sure that I make it to where I want to go yawm al-qiyamah, not here in dunya. That's why when people are in shock, why this happened? أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ. They're not the same. Not the same. I'm not going to treat them the same. They're going to be different, of course. A Muslim is one thing, a Mujrim is something else. They're never equal, so remember that. When you say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, you are embracing a set of values. You're taking a set of ethics. You're living by them. You're carrying them with you where you go. You don't shed blood. You don't cause harm. You don't take something that's not yours. You don't mistreat people. You don't accept injustice. You don't accept oppression. You don't accept transgression. You don't initiate it yourself. That's what it means to be Muslim. That's what it means. But I thought Islam was, yes, and then in addition to that, you're going to pray, and you're going to fast, and you're going to perform your zakah, and you're going to, all these things you'll do as well, for sure. But this is the beginning of it. And the opposite of someone who's carrying these values in life is a mujrim, is the one who breaks Allah's law, is a criminal in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are not in any way equal. And that's the ayah, that's the anchor verse within this paragraph, this anchor verse that if you're reading the Quran appropriately and you're thinking about the verse, has to tickle your intellect a little bit, because he compared between two things that usually you don't compare between. Usually it's Muslimin and Kafirin. That's what we're used to, and that's very appropriate, but not in Surat Al-Qalam. Surat Al-Qalam, he compared between two other things, reminding you of what it means to be Muslim to begin with, reminding you that it's not just about the articles of faith, of accepting Allah and His Malaika and Kutub al-Rusul. Great, but there's something else here that you have to embrace as well. If you don't embrace, then it's not going to work for you. That's why the verses continue. مَا لَكُمْ, what's wrong with you? كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ, how do you give your judgment? Based on what are you judging anything? كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ, explain to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, explain. How do you make judgment? How is it that you think a Muslim can be a mujrim, or a mujrim can be a Muslim, and that they are somehow equal, and that we're going to treat them the same? That someone can come and pray in the first saf and have a half a meter lihya and put a nice big imamah, and he can stand there and read Quran with a beautiful voice and then go and oppress someone, or go and stand by an oppressor, or go and accept bloodshed, or go and cheat someone, or go lie to people, or harm them or mistreat them. You think this is acceptable? Never. It'll never be acceptable. They are not the same thing, and they will not be treated the same way. And they will never be seen like that by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Malakum, what's wrong with you? كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ, how do you make these judgments? And then the ayat get a little bit more personal. أَمْ لَكُمْ كِتَابٌ فِيهِ تَدْرُسُونَ إِنَّ لَكُمْ فِيهِ لَمَا تَخَيَّرُونَ, or is it that you have a book? أَمْ لَكُمْ كِتَاب, or is it that you have a book? فِيهِ تَدْرُسُونَ, within it you are studying. What are you studying? What are you learning? Tadrusun is when you study and learn something. So what is it that you're studying? إِنَّ لَكُمْ فِيهِ لَمَا تَخَيَّرُونَ, that you can get whatever you want whenever you want it. That you get to choose which values to keep and which values to shun, and you get to make the actual judgment of what is good and what is right. Takhayyarun is from ikhtiyar. It's from takhayyarun, what you like, what you prefer, what you choose. Do you have a book, a divine book, where you study within it that you can be whatever you want to be? You can choose whatever you want and you're still going to be fine Yawm al-Qiyamah? These verses, if they don't make you scared, then you're not understanding them. If these verses don't make you shiver as a Muslim, not even as a Muslim, then you haven't understood them. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you're a Muslim and you're breaking my law. You're breaking my law and you're Muslim. And you think that's okay. What's wrong with you? How are you making your judgment? But you have a book, aside from this, another book that I sent, where you're reading in it that you can do whatever you want and you're going to still make it Yawm al-Qiyamah? Where does it say that in the Quran? Where does the Quran say that, yeah, go live however you want? Just utter the words and you're fine. Where? Show me. Show me where it says that in the Quran. I dare you. Show me in the Quran where it says in any of the verses that a Muslim, that you can afford to feel completely comfortable, that you're going to be fine. Just say the words and you'll be fine. Nowhere in the Quran will you find that. You will find in the Prophet ﷺ's traditions certain ahadith that are taken out of context. They are taken out of context of what he was trying to do for people. Used to numb us. Used as tranquilizers. In the vein. Just need the hadith so I don't have to think anymore. I don't have to worry. I don't have to actually change anything. I don't have to actually take a look at myself and assess my actions and my values. Khalas, I'm Muslim, I said the words, I'm good. Where? أَمْ لَكُمْ كِتَابٌ فِيهِ تَدْرُسُونَ إِنَّ لَكُمْ فِيهِ لَمَا تَخَيَّرُونَ. That's what? No? أَمْ لَكُمْ أَيْمَانٌ عَلَيْنَا بَالِغَةٌ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. Or did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you His oath? Ayman is the plural of yameen, as in an oath or a pledge. Or do you have with you documentation that Allah gives you His oath, His word? بَالِغَةٌ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. An oath that will take you to the day of judgment, that on that day, إِنَّ لَكُمْ لَمَا تَحْكُمُونَ, you will get whatever you want. You have that? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do you have like evidence where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised you that Yawm al-Qiyamah you come and everything will work out exactly the way you want it to work? No? Then what are you doing? What are you doing if you don't have any of these things? That first question is the problem. أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ? You want us to equate a Muslim and a mujrim? Never. Never. They are not. You can't be both. See, this ayah is putting Muslim and mujrim as two opposites. In Arabic, they say, وَبِضِدِّهَا تَتَمَايَزُ الْأَشْيَاءُ. You only know something by knowing its opposite. That's the only way you can figure something out. The reason that sweet is something is a word is because they're sour. The reason that life is something is because there's death. If you remove the opposite, there's no way to you can't use the word. You have a rock. Can you say this rock is alive or is dead? No, because this concept doesn't exist. There's no opposite for it. So the whole idea can't be applied to it because there's no you need opposites for everything. So he's putting subhanahu wa ta'ala Muslim and mujrim as two opposites. Either you're this or you're that. I can't be both. No, you can't. No, you can't. You can't claim Islam and then go and break his law subhanahu wa ta'ala and mistreat and no, you can't. We saw that yesterday and today, didn't we? See how criminals end. Takes a bit of time. What goes around comes around. What goes around it takes a bit of time, but what goes around comes around. It just takes a long time. It took 54 years, that's all. I mean, and because we don't live very long, for us that's a long time. But in the bigger picture of it all, is it long? Is 54 years a long time? Is 14 years a long time? 75 years a long time? Is 100 a long time? No, it's not. It's just the pity is on us. The pity is on us because we live such a short life. We live short lives. And sometimes you don't get to see, sometimes you do. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you something. He shows you something just to remind you of His grace and remind you of His presence and remind you of His law, right? And sometimes you don't get to see it. But what you're left with is what you did with that time. And what force were you? What force were you? In which direction were you pushing things? On what side of the tracks were you standing? With whom were you working? Who were you helping out? What was your cause? That's it. It's it. It's absolutely it. There's nothing else. That's the story of existence. There's nothing else because you and I cannot force outcomes. We can't force outcomes. We try, but we can't force outcomes. We can plan it out really well. We can do our best. We can exhaust all the resources. We can use all the data, but we can't force the outcome to happen or not. You just do your best, and then if you're not a Muslim, you you cross your fingers. I'm stupid, right? Isn't that what non-believers? Is that what we do? Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers for you. Wallahi, Allah yuzik al-khair. Allah, you're crossing your fingers for me. MashaAllah, that must be so hard. Can't imagine. What a sacrifice, crossing your fingers for me. It's ridiculous. No, we Muslims do their best, and then they put their hands and they turn to their Lord, and they ask Him to accept the little that they have done, and ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow the little that they have done to have some fruition. And if it doesn't have fruition, for Him to forgive their shortcomings and accept it anyway. That's it. That's all this is. And every once in a while you see it, that Muslimin are never like mujrimeen. And if you're like, no, they're being treated the same, then I tell you, ma lakum, what's wrong with you? Kayfa tahkumun? How do you, what judgment, what thought process do you use? Do you not have critical thinking skills for you to see them to be the same? Huh? Or do you have a book that within it you read that you get to choose whatever you want? You get to decide what's good and what's bad and what happens or not. Or do you have an oath, a pledge from God Himself that on the day of judgment you get to choose where you're going to go? سَلْهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ بِذَلِكَ زَعِيمٌ أَمْ لَهُمْ شُرَكَاءُ فَلْيَأْتُوا بِشُرَكَائِهِمْ إِن كَانُوا صَادِقِينَ. Salhum, ask them, أَيُّهُمْ بِذَلِكَ زَعِيمٌ. Which of them, which of any of these people can claim these things? Can claim that they have superior judgment, تَحْكُمُونَ. They know what they're saying. That they ask them, which of them, Za'im is someone who owns something and says, yes, I own this. I claim it, I'm the champion of it. Huh? Which of them, Selhum, ask them, which of them is the champion of these claims? Can claim that their judgment is superior, or that they have a book that tells them they can do whatever they want, or that they have pledges from God Himself that they can choose where they're going Yawm al-Qiyamah? No one? أَمْ لَهُمْ شُرَكَاء. Or do they have associates? Yeah? Do they have associates that told them, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it for you with God, don't worry, do what you want. Khalas, indi. We love that. Arab love that, by the way. We absolutely worship that, we love it. I don't know if brothers and sisters from the other cultures have the same thing, but honestly, this is something that, this is the best thing you can find. Not only do the Arab like to hear it from other people, an Arabi will live all his life just to be able to say it. Like the Arabs will get themselves to a higher spot just so they can tell someone. You come to them with a problem, Indi, I'll take care of it for you. They feel, right? It's nice. In dunya, it's totally reasonable. In dunya, it's reasonable because we're equal. We're equal. Yes, I can be your associate. What? أنت وحدك لا شريك لك. لا, you have لك شركاء. You have people who are associate to you, so I can be your associate. And if someone came and asked me for help, I can say, I'll take care of it. He's my associate. Totally, no problem at all. But then when it comes to God, that doesn't work. So the Arab didn't like that. So they, and not just the Arab, humanity didn't like that. So they start making associates to God. Okay, the big one seems to have a lot of rules. Give me a couple of associates that are a little bit more lenient, who take bribes, who can bring them food and stuff, and I need to polish them out, and they'll give us they'll let things slide. أَمْ لَهُمْ شُرَكَاء. Or do these people have associates with me? فَلْيَأْتُوا بِشُرَكَائِهِمْ. Bring me the associates in كَانُوا صَادِقِينَ if you are truthful. Because he has no associate, subhanahu wa ta'ala. See the argument? Are you listening to this heavy going after this claim? What are you doing? You think that a Muslim and a criminal are ever going to be the same? You think that you can equate them? You think you can get away with acting like you're a Muslim and a criminal? And then if the answer is well, then you get this barrage of verses that just take you down. They just break you down. How dare you? How dare I think that? What judgment do I have? What book tells me that? What pledge do I have from him? What associate do I have access to? None of that. None of that. I have none of this. And based on what? Then if I want to know what goes Yawm al-Qiyamah and what doesn't go, then I turn back to him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I ask him. It's the lifelong question. It's the everlasting problem of how do we define a good person, right? How do we define a good person? Who defines that? Who defines that? This is a big question. This is a existential question. Who defines what a good person is? Who gets to say, because I have this all the time. Someone comes and talks to me about a problem and they tell me, but I'm a good person. And I have, hold. How? Who told you that? Just out of interest, I just want to know, like, how do you know? No, I know I myself. I know, oh, you're the authority on who's good and bad. SubhanAllah. I've been spending all my life studying this. Apparently you're the one who makes the decision on who's a good person, who's not a good person. How do you say that about yourself? Based on what? I'm a good person. Good person. The whole point of life is for him to judge Yawm al-Qiyamah if you were a good person or not. You've already made the judgment. You've come to the conclusion that you're a good person. You've given yourself the thumbs up, and now what is it? Just extra time? You're sitting on, you substituted out, and you're sitting outside waiting for your prize? What is this? This concept is a problem where we use these phrases. The one who decides who's a good person, who's not a good person, is the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, He makes that judgment. You were good or you were not. He tells us if I was a good person. Or I define being a good person versus not being a good person based on His teachings. That's how we define it. It's defined by the Almighty, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He defines it. He tells me if something is good or something is bad. It comes from Him. He's the source of it. And that piece is difficult because people, they don't necessarily accept that. Which is why you're Muslim, which is why this whole equation for you is different. Because as a Muslim, not only do you accept that, that is where you got your standard from. Who is to say that honesty is better than lying? Who's to say that? Think about this. I'm sorry. This may be philosophical, but let's zoom out for a moment. Why is honesty better than lying? Why? Why would I let anybody know what I'm actually thinking and doing? Isn't that counterproductive for me? Isn't that going to take away from me my ability to achieve my goals? Because I'm too transparent. You know exactly what I'm saying, and because I'm always honest with you. You can predict me. I'm predictable to you now. Now you can find a way to put I need to put the stick in my wheels, and you can flip me over because I'm telling you everything. Who said that honesty is better than lying? Think about this for a moment. We accept it as maxims as Muslims. We say, no, of course al-sidq is better than lying because the Prophet ﷺ drilled it into our minds. And when we lie, we immediately go back. But I can tell you there's a whole set of people on this planet who don't agree with that. Who don't agree with being honest. And they don't think it's the best policy. And they don't actually take on these values. And they think someone like me, who sees that to be the way out, to be absolutely insane. They see someone who says this to be, what do you know? Miskeen, jahil. You're ignorant and you're naive, and that's why you're poor and you have no money. It's because you think that honesty is a nice thing. And he makes that, subhanahu wa ta'ala, list. He puts the list of what is good and what is bad. He defines it. So you want to be able to call yourself good Yawm al-Qiyamah? Look at his list and adhere to it. And make sure that you're hitting every checkbox. And if you're not, then go back and fix it again and make sure that you're checking all the boxes. Because he defines that, subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not done yet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with just commenting on that one concept, he's not done. We still have a couple more verses. We'll recite them, inshallah. يوم يكشف عن ساق ويدعون إلى السجود فلا يستطيعون خاشعة أبصارهم ترهقهم ذلة وقد كانوا يدعون إلى السجود وهم سالمون فذرني ومن يكذب بهذا الحديث سنستدرجهم من حيث لا يعلمون وأملي لهم إن كيدي متين أم تسألهم أجرا فهم من مغرم مثقلون أم عندهم الغيب فهم يكتبون So he gives us subhanahu wa ta'ala a snapshot of Yawm al-Qiyamah. And in the Quran, there's no surah that tells you the story of Yawm al-Qiyamah from the beginning to the end, with all the details. All you have are snapshots that are scattered all throughout the Quran. So you have to read the whole thing to get the full picture. And here subhanahu wa ta'ala, after chastising the intellect that allowed Islam to be somehow associated or equated to ijram, to criminality in any form, he gives subhanahu wa ta'ala a snapshot of that day. And he says, يَوْمَ يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ, on the day where the saq is going to be revealed or lifted, the veil is going to be lifted away from it. Now, I don't want to get into the detailed aqaidi discussion regarding this verse. So I'm going to go by the interpretation of the scholars who understood this verse in a figurative manner. The Arab would say, and this is a very known thing for that, they would say, كَشَفَتِ الْحَرْبُ عَنْ سَاقِهَا, that the war has revealed its shin. And the word saq is shin, right? As in shin. So the Arab would use that phrase to say that things are getting really bad, things are very scary. That's what they would use for. Now, there's two ways to understand this piece of the verse. Either this is talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's saq, whatever that means, and if it does have a meaning, then we don't have the ability to draw analogies to it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time and space, and we do not equate him to any of his creations subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is a discussion of aqeedah that I don't want for this session because it's just going to derail. If you want to know the answer to these questions, attend the aqeedah course that I run every May, and that way you'll have the answer for it. And if you don't attend it, then soon that will be the way you get in the door. If you haven't attended the aqeedah course, we'll send you over to a different masjid to pray. Because we need to understand, we have to agree on certain things in order for us to understand the Quran appropriately. يَوْمَ يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ, I'm going to, for the purpose of this study, I'm going to understand it in the form of how the Arab would use the term. Meaning, when, يَوْمَ, on the day, يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ, when things become very difficult. Figure of speech, يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ here, understand it in the way the Arab would use it, as in the day where things become extremely difficult. Where it's extremely, the hardship is beyond what you could even possibly imagine. And this is referring to an aspect, a day, a point in Yawm al-Qiyamah, where Allah subhanahu وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ صَفًّا صَفًّا, where your Lord and his throne and his angels subhanahu wa ta'ala come, and for the first time the human race is able to appreciate the presence of their Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. In whatever way that happens Yawm al-Qiyamah, that I cannot even begin to explain to you because I don't understand myself. But it's a moment of great majesty, and it's a moment of reverence and fear. And on that day when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents himself to his servants, it is called upon all those who are standing there for judgment. All the billions and billions of people, they'll be called up and commanded to prostrate for their Lord, to perform sujood. يَوْمَ يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ وَيُدْعَوْنَ إِلَى السُّجُودِ, and they are called upon to perform prostration, to perform sujood. فَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ, and they can't. This is the mujrimeen. The ones who broke that law, that sacred law of God, and thought somehow that they could get away with it. Somehow they were going to still be treated like Muslims, they're going to be making it Yawm al-Qiyamah to where they wanted to go. On that day, they will come to make their sujood, and they can't. In life, the higher the head is held, the more status you have. The lower the head is held, the less status that you have. Yawm al-Qiyamah is the day where all of the rules and the norms are broken. All of the rules and all the norms are broken that day. On that day, the one whose head is held high is the one with the least status. That person, خَاشِعَةً أَبْصَارُهُم. Their eyes, you look at their eyes and you see a sense of humiliation. You see a sense of fear. You see a sense of lack of status. تَرْهَقُهُمْ ذِلَّةٌ. They are smothered with humbleness. They are smothered with low status. It is a dhul, when someone is absolutely humiliated. خَاشِعَةً أَبْصَارُهُم. Their eyes, when you look at their eyes, are in a state of fear and of lack of importance and lack of significance. تَرْهَقُهُمْ ذِلَّةٌ. They are smothered by humiliation. وَقَدْ كَانُوا. Why? Because they can't make it to the ground. Everyone else is putting their heads down in prostration to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال فإذا أتى يومها ذهب ظهر الفاسق طبقا واحدا. The back of the fasiq or the fajr, the mujrim as the verses say, goes like a piece of granite. It just won't move. The vertebrae, it does not work anymore. And you want to make it down because everyone's doing sujood, and right now you're the only person with your head up, and this is absolutely humiliating. What do you mean? Your head's up. This is a point of status for you. Everyone's head's down. No, Yawm al-Qiyamah is the opposite. Everything is the opposite Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's why it's a qari'ah, because it changes everything. So they can't make it to the ground. Why? وَقَدْ كَانُوا يُدْعَوْنَ إِلَى السُّجُودِ وَهُمْ سَالِمُونَ. They were called upon performing prostration, وَهُمْ سَالِمُونَ, when they were doing well, when they were doing absolutely fine, and they didn't listen. They didn't listen. So listen to what he says subhanahu wa ta'ala. See the application of these verses. These are by Tafseer of Allah what we're reciting today. There's nothing to do. I did not plan this. How would I? I had no idea. Listen to what he says. فَذَرْنِي. Leave me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet alayhi sallam, leave me. فَذَرْنِي. وَمَن يُكَذِّبُ بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ. And the one who refuses to acknowledge the honesty, truthfulness, and righteousness of what I have just explained. Al-hadith, what we just talked about. What did he just talk about? What have you been talking about? That Muslimin are not mujrimeen. This is what he's been talking about. That's the hadith. That's what he's been talking about for the last, for those of you who have been putting up with it for the last 45 minutes, that's what he's been talking about, subhanahu wa ta'ala, that a Muslim and a Mujrim are never the same. And you cannot, they're opposites and they will never be the same person. And if they are, then there's a problem with your judgment. You're lying, you're acting like you have revelation that says that when you don't. You have a pledge from God that says that? Do you have someone who's going to intervene for you Yawm al-Qiyamah on that? Does anyone dare to say this? No one does. Well, know that Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Mujrim is going to come at a point of actual difficulty. He'll be called to perform sujood, and then he can't go. And then he'll be humiliated truly, because he was called to do this in dunya, he didn't do it. So Allah says, فَذَرْنِي, leave me. وَمَنْ يُكَذِّبُ بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ, and the one who refuses to accept this concept and this discussion. The one who refuses this hadith, leave me with them. Don't worry. سَنَسْتَدْرِجُهُمْ, we're going to lure them slowly. مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, from an angle that they didn't think about. They are going to be lured in a way that they did not imagine. They did not have the ability to imagine. They're just going to find themselves. Does it sound familiar to you? Is it not familiar? فَذَرْنِي, this is what Allah says. This is what we're reciting today. فَذَرْنِي وَمَنْ يُكَذِّبُ بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ, leave me. Leave me with the one who refuses this, who knows it's the truth and says no anyways. Leave me with them. We'll take care of them. We'll lure them from an angle that they never thought was even possible. وَأُمْلِي لَهُمْ, and I will delay it for them. I will give them time. You want 50 years? Here's 50 years. Here's 54 years. Go ahead. Here's 14 years. Go ahead. Take your time. وَأُمْلِي لَهُمْ إِنَّ كَيْدِي مَتِينٌ, indeed, my plotting is thick. My plotting is thick. إِنَّ كَيْدِي مَتِينٌ. This is what he's being told, alayhi salatu wasalam. Are you worried about? You're worrying about the Mujrim. Don't worry about the Mujrim. Worry about being one. Worry about being one. Worry about supporting one. Don't worry about one. Don't worry about them. Why? Dharni, leave me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you leave me with them. I'll take care of it. Do your job, but don't worry. Don't worry. I'll take care of them. I will lure them in. من حيث لا يعلمون سنستدرجهم. Istidraj is where you're walked down a path slowly. You don't know where you think you're going in the right direction. You're not noticing that you're actually taking steps because it's so slow. Right? When things are slow, you don't really notice the changes because it's so slow. They're going to slowly be lured in a direction that they never even thought of. They didn't have the ability to protect themselves from because they didn't imagine. وَأُمْلِي لَهُمْ, and I'm going to give them time. الْإِمْلَاء, I'm going to give them time. Take your time. Do your thing. Make sure that you make enough mistakes so that Yawm al-Qiyamah you come and you find nothing. Subhanallah al-Azim. How else is someone going to be punished Yawm al-Qiyamah? Aside from being given every chance and they don't take it, so that يَحِقُّ الْحَقُّ عَلَيْهِ, so that righteousness is going to be served on the Day of Judgment. وَأُمْلِي لَهُمْ, indeed, my plot is thick. إِنَّ كَيْدِي مَتِينٌ. Subhanallah. We read these verses, but I'm not sure we necessarily, I'm not sure how much we take from them. I'm not sure if we truly believe them or not. We've been given a chance to renew our faith in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. This is a chance for you as a Muslim who maybe has not been able to renew your faith in things. To renew your faith that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to take someone, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to punish someone, He will. And that a mujrim, that the criminal will not be left alone. The criminal will be brought to justice. It's just a matter of time. Just time. They have a little bit of time. Don't be sad about time. You don't understand time. Neither do I. You don't have a lot of it anyways. وَأُمْلِي لَهُمْ, I give them time. إِنَّ كَيْدِي مَتِينٌ. أَمْ تَسْأَلُهُمْ أَجْرًا فَهُمْ مِنْ مَغْرَمٍ مُثْقَلُونَ. Or what is it that you're doing, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? This is where the last chapter begins. The last chapter of this surah begins with أَمْ تَسْأَلُهُمْ أَجْرًا, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the questioning from the mujrim and turns the questioning to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam at the end of this verse. He is the ethical standard for us as Muslims. Always has been and always will be, alayhi salatu wasalam. Since He's the ethical standard and He's the source of our values, alayhi salatu wasalam, we hold ourselves to his character, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of this surah asks him some questions. He says, أَمْ تَسْأَلُهُمْ أَجْرًا? Or are you asking them for money? Is that why they don't want to believe in you? Are they refusing your faith because you're asking ajr, you want money for this? فَهُمْ مِنْ مَغْرَمٍ مُثْقَلُونَ, and they are in a state of heavy debt. Al-maghram is debt. Muthqalun is when you are burdened by it. Muthqalun is when you're burdened by something. Al-muthqal is someone who's burdened. فَهُمْ مِنْ مَغْرَمٍ, someone who is burdened by maghram, by debt. So the question is, why aren't they listening to you, Ya Rasulullah? Huh? Is it because تَسْأَلُهُمْ أَجْرًا? Because you're asking them for wealth and they are burdened by the weight of the debt that they are carrying, so they can't afford to pay you for what it is that you're offering them? أَمْ عِنْدَهُمُ الْغَيْبِ فَهُمْ يَكْتُبُونَ, or do they have revelation? Or do they have access to ghaib? And they are writing down all the information of ghaib that they have. And the rhetorical questions that both answers are no. Both rhetorical questions. أَمْ تَسْأَلُهُمْ أَجْرًا? No. I always have to stop at this one here and say something. You'll find this verse repeated in the Quran multiple times, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us what the prophets are saying to their people. لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مَالًا, right? لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا. Where someone who is going to do something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not asking for anything in return. This sacred relationship between the preacher and the congregation, between the scholar and the congregation, between the khatib and the congregation, between this sacred relationship that the prophets ﷺ began, is based on the fact that there is no ajr involved in this. There's no money involved in this. It's not based on money. It's based on ajr that is happening yawm al-qiyamah. It's based on that I do what I do because that's what I'm obligated to do. And you do what you do because you're obligated to do that too. Because we're both carrying an equal obligation. It's just manifesting itself in different ways, that's all. It just manifests itself in different ways. We don't all have to do the exact same job. It would be impossible. If we were all doctors, then the world wouldn't work. If we're all engineers, or all lawyers, or all teachers, or all shuyukh, it doesn't work. If we're all zu'ama, if everyone's a leader, there's no, who's going to follow? It doesn't work. Everyone is going to participate, just we're not going to do the exact same thing, but the obligation is equal. It's an equal obligation. And this sacred relationship that existed between prophets and their followers, between the scholars of the early times of as-Salaf and their congregation, was that did not have money involved in it. It did not have anything that ruined the sanctity of it. And we're living at a time today where it's a little bit different. And it's not the same anymore. And I don't know if that's one of the reasons that all of the teachers that I learned from, all of my shuyukh, were either pharmacists, physicians, accountants, or engineers. Or they owned a business. One of our teachers, Shaykh al-Nahas, he had the biggest market or place, business for selling copper. They sold copper. If you went into the shop, you wouldn't know he was a sheikh because he's absolutely covered in the filth of the metal. Salah came, he made wudu, he walked in, he wore the jubba, put the imam, and now he's our teacher. And he's like, you know how Superman walked into the booth and came out? That's how he used to do. He used to leave his shop. He looked, if you saw him on the road, you probably wouldn't even give salams. You wouldn't sure if this person's asking for money. And then he would walk into the masjid after wudu, wear his jubba, put his imam. Now he's one of the biggest scholars of fiqh, Shafi'i in the world. They didn't ask for any money. Never. I don't have a teacher that taught me anything that I remember. Anything that I remember that has any value to it, that was ever paid for anything that he ever did, ever. And to me, I have to be honest, that's probably one of the reasons. Is that the relationship that we had. I'll tell this story. My dad's here, he probably don't like. But when I finished my ijazah with my teacher, we did it at my house. He came to the di'a, like to our village. So he came, Allah yajzil khair, and with him was a couple of the shuyukh, and it was a final, it was 2001 or 2002. Something like that. And he came to our house and I recited like the end of the ijazah, and of course he made dua and everything. And at the end of that, the shuyukh had lunch with us, and they went and they ate mush. It was very nice, a beautiful day. At the end of it, my father wanted to gift my sheikh something, which is very reasonable. This man put up with me for 2 years. So my father's thinking, he deserves money. Yani, this guy, you put up with my son for 2 years, I need to pay you for something. Yani, I have to compensate you for seeing his face every week for 2 years. You totally deserve a little bit of money. So he thought of a gift. So he came to give the Shaykh. Wallahi, the Shaykh was going to take the ijazah away from me. He was going to take the ijazah away. He almost left, upset. He got very offended, and we had to spend like a good amount of time apologizing because he didn't understand. Like, to him, this was like, what are you doing? Money? Not even, no, it's just as a gift. A'udhu billah. A'udhu billah, wallahi, he didn't speak to me for a month. Because to them, this is something that's absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely not okay. I believe that we've tainted the relationship between the scholar and the congregation a little bit with how we run our masajid and how we run our Islamic institutions. I truly believe this. And I've been talking about this for a long time. I believe we've ruined it when we made the imam position a hired position. And we pay them money, and we treat them like an employee, and we have a board of 7, 8 people who hold them accountable for stuff. That doesn't sit properly with me. It doesn't. It doesn't mean that any scholar or any preacher or any imam or any teacher should walk around unaccountable, going around with no accountability and no one to answer to. Of course not. That's insane. That's a bad recipe for anything. But when the concept of Islamic leadership and Islamic teaching and scholarship and ilm and Quran is somehow attached in any form or manner with some monetary value to it, right? It takes something away from it. And if you don't believe me, go back and study the lives of the scholars in the early ages. Like study the life of Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad. And study all the scholars who are famous, who wrote the great books that we know today, that we hold, the ones that we hold in high. See if any of them were paid employees in any institution of any sort. And you'll find that they lived a life where they completely separated between what they did for the sake of Allah and they did for the sake of their ummah and their community, and what they did to take care of themselves financially. Very different things. I understand that what I'm saying right now may not be attractive or something that everyone agrees to. I get it. But I'm challenging the idea in order for us to maybe have the hope at one point in the future to change things around. I believe that the future of our ummah is going to be ulama and scholars and a'imma that are going to be raised and taught and educated and bred within masajid, and they're going to have degrees that are going to allow them to make their own livings. They're going to be doctors and physicists and pharmacists and lawyers and engineers and teachers, and they're going to have Islamic knowledge because they did a parallel learning in their lifetime. This is what I see the future to be. And then our masajid are run by people who are truly role models for the generation that's going to come after them. And that's how our ummah will change again. And that's how we will go back to what we once were. We have to go back to that again. You don't need to stop your life to become knowledgeable in Islamic law. You don't have to put the brakes on your life. No, you can make your living. You can have something that you can take care of. You become a scholar who's not independent in this thought process, can't say anything of worth. If I'm scared, if they're paying me, if I was working here and they paid me, right, and I wanted to say something that I believe to be the truth, I have to run it by Muhammad first. Because Muhammad is writing the check. Muhammad, can I say this? Imagine, if that was his case, then khalas, it's not me. Just go to him. Right? Don't ask me questions. Ask him. Ask him if it's okay for me to say this. That's what it turns into. It turns into that. Wallahi, whether you like it or not, it turns into that. If at any point I'm thinking in the back of my mind, if I say this, I lose my livelihood, I can't take care of my children, I'm going to step back. And if I think that, then I am of no use to you. I am of no use. If I can't make an independent decision based on what I have learned and what I know of the deen, then I am completely useless as a speaker. You don't talk to me. Go to the one who's carrying who writes the checks. And that's the person who will fix your problem. That's the person who will get you the fatwa. That's the person who can get you the time that you're looking for, or the focus that you're looking for. That wasn't like that. Imam Ahmad specifically, by the way, this is like a side note. Imam Ahmad didn't have an actual, he didn't have a profession. Imam Ahmad specifically didn't have a profession. He spent all of his life traveling gathering hadith. He dedicated his life not just to fiqh, but also to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So he didn't have a profession. But he refused to take a salary or money from anyone. And what he did, this is what you find in the books of the Hanabila. You can go read. Imam Ahmad, the way he lived, the way he made a living, is that he and his family would go after they harvested wheat and pick up whatever was left and sell it. Back then, they didn't have these big machines that kept all the wheat. So when you harvested wheat, a lot would fall off. Now the farmers don't want it all there. They want the land cleaned up. Al-Ba'al. You go. So he would go, and that's what he would do. He did that for a living. He did that for a living, refusing to take a salary from anyone, so that his opinion would continue to be. And that's why when they came and told him, you have to say Quran is this, he said, nope. He said it. He had no problem, because they weren't paying him. Yeah? He was not taking anything from them. So he held his independence, and he saved the independence of Muslim scholars with his mawqif, by the way. And we have yet again tarnished it. We've tarnished it again today, which is why we struggle. On with that, we'll continue inshallah in Surat Al-Qalam next week. Subhanallah bihamdik, la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. We'll go for Salat al-Isha inshallah.